at the end of the day, our single biggest achievement, and one of the reasons why we're as an ecosystem worth $12 billion is the power of our consensus protocol, Ouroboros, and the trust it's constructed, the density of stake pool operators we have, and the unblemished service record. Currently, that good is not exportable. And what Minotaur is doing is making that exportable now to the rest of the cryptocurrency ecosystem and saying, hey, this capability is for hire and for the income of the Cardano network as a whole, the ADA holders and the SPOs, because they built it. It's a great resource to export. So that's another beauty of the whole partner chain concept, is it gives us a way to actually sell a network resource that we currently can't sell. And frankly, no network can really sell very well.
What is going on, ADA Nation? Welcome to Dapp Central. My name is Fareed, and in today's video, I've got three very special guests joining me to break down something that has been a huge topic within the Cardano community. Now, that is going to be Midnight. That said, let me bring on today's co-host, who is going to be Chris O, the crypto bro from Twitter. Chris, welcome aboard. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Fareed. This is a exciting opportunity.
Very well said. Let's go ahead and bring on the two guests here. The first is going to be Eran Barak, the CEO of Midnight. Eran, welcome aboard. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here.
Yeah, this is, I think, both of our pleasures. You've been a hot topic here, not only within the past couple of days, but even at the Cardano Summit, with a couple of key speeches that really drew a lot of insight and a lot of questions from the Cardano community. So hopefully we're able to get some of those answered here as a part of today's video. Now, last but definitely not least, we're going to be bringing on the man himself, Charles Hoskinson, the CEO and founder of Input Output. Charles, welcome aboard.
Good to be here, guys.
Yeah, this is such an instrumental moment here to have the both of you guys here on a call with myself. So I just want to say, first and foremost, thank you. I know that both of you guys have a very busy schedule, and I know that Charles is also not feeling the best right now. So thank you for joining us during this time, and we definitely wish you well. That said, let's maybe just go ahead and just dive right on in. For anybody who hasn't heard of either of you within the Cardano community, I'd be highly surprised, but I do want to give them an opportunity to kind of hear a little bit about who you are and what you guys are doing in terms of contributing to Cardano. So maybe Eran can kick us off, and then Charles will come over to you for an introduction.
Sure. So a little bit about myself. I started my career as a software developer, moved over to product marketing, sales, and many other adventures. Have been mainly active in the financial industry for many years, brought up some startups. Some have been immensely successful and very proud of them. But in the last 2 years, I've spent some time working with Gavin Wood at Parity, and more recently now joined with Charles here to lead the Midnight Initiative, and very excited to be the first partner chain for Cardano.
Thank you for the introduction there. Charles, you want to go ahead?
I'm Charles Hoskinson. I do stuff in the Cardano ecosystem. You guys might remember me from a few things like IO, for example. And I'm just real excited to be here and be able to share some of the cool things we're working on, and also have a great dialogue.
Yeah. Again, thank you both for your time. That said, we've got a couple of questions, and I just want to kind of lay out the agenda here for today's viewers. So the very first thing that we want to jump into, the very first theme, is just going to be a little bit about understanding Midnight. For anybody who missed the video yesterday, I do want to just quickly plug this in. Charles spent about 45 minutes in a Midnight special, which was a really informative live stream for myself. But then there was also an additional interview that was done with another Cardano content creator, which I'll go ahead and leave the link to as well down below. Now, after we jump into those questions surrounding understanding Midnight, we want to jump into the marketing aspect of Midnight as well, trying to see exactly what your guys' plans are in terms of reaching the masses when it comes to that. Following that, there was the recent launch of the DevNet. So I want to kind of get your guys' feedback as to how the Pioneers onboarding has been, and then what we could potentially expect in terms of dApps launching on the DevNet. Now, last but not least, this is probably the biggest piece here for some of the community is going to be the actual dust token airdrop, or just any information surrounding the tokenomics. So I'm not sure if we're able to squeeze anything out of you guys when it comes to that, but we're definitely going to go ahead and try. And then very lastly, I just actually added this to the agenda. I do want to jump into a recent stablecoin venture that was announced not too long ago. So at this time, we're going to jump into the very first couple of questions surrounding understanding Midnight. And I'm going to hand over the reins to Chris to pose the first three questions.
Thank you so much, Farid. And firstly, thank you so much, Charles, for doing a encompassing and detailed video last night, especially while you were sick. So that was, I think, brought a lot of clarity and understanding to the broader community and with the questions they had. So forgive the redundancy, but just for the sake of completeness, just Wavetop perhaps. Could you describe the nature of the Cardano asset settlement layer and its relationship with the partner chains from a technological standpoint? But more importantly, and I think something that still needs to resonate somewhat with the community at large, is the nature of the economic ties from the parent chain, the base layer, the asset settlement layer, with the partner chains, and how the economic activity flows to and fro the Cardano service layer and the base layer.
That's a great question. So the first thing you have to understand is that when you build a blockchain protocol, it's a collection of design decisions and trade-offs. And so you have to think about everything from, how does my consensus model work? So how do we reach consensus amongst everybody who's here? Is it more homogeneous or heterogeneous? How does your transaction model work? What are the semantics behind that transaction model? So is it account-based, UTXO-based? You look at things like the network model, the synchronization assumptions the network model has, as well as how is data stored inside the system. So when I initiate a transaction, am I storing that forever, or am I storing like a SQL database where it can be updated and replaced? There's thousands of trade-offs within each of those categories. And no matter what you've done as an architect, you've picked a snapshot of trade-offs that you think are appropriate for a collection of use cases. The problem is that the minute you set that, then all the things you didn't choose that somebody else does, you have no way of replicating or emulating easily. So you can emulate an account model with extended UTXO, but it's not so easy. You can try to create a global state and create a virtual machine and be non-deterministic, but it's not easy. There's dozens of things like that. And so what we tried to do is say, all right, we're going to pick the best set of trade-offs for a sustainable, stable system that has a high root of trust, can easily be scaled to high throughput. It has a lot of great features for financial markets, so like a proper financial operating system. But then there's going to be openings for decentralized infrastructure, for decentralized AI, for decentralized telecommunications, for high levels of confidentiality and privacy, or regulatory compliance, or whatever the heck you care about. And instead of just saying, let's just ignore it and pretend like those don't have any economic value, let's build hooks into Cardano in a multi-layered model where you can plug in other systems that have different trade-offs to them, and those systems can become effectively a service layer that allows Cardano to then gain those capabilities for the DApps that are built on it. Now, what's nice about this is that those services change over the time. They have their own design trade-offs. They have their own life cycle, their own governance. They can have their own tokenomics. Some can be very useful in the beginning. Others can not be so useful. And a marketplace basically decides, just like a marketplace decides what dApps are good and not so good. So this was the idea of what we came up with back in 2016 when we were first designing Cardano, of this idea of a settlement layer and a control layer that we've kind of nuanced to say now we have like assets and settlement. So that's where the 9 million Cardano native assets live. And that's kind of the core of Cardano. And this control layer is now what we call the service layer, of which we built a Partnerchain framework to basically allow you to populate out that service layer. And Midnight is the first case study of that. And what it does is it gives you a whole bunch of new design trade-offs and capabilities, a whole bunch of new privacy features and confidentiality features, new ways of building things that don't replace the way that you build things, but enhance the way that you build things for a Cardano application. And then the goal is, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to do a lot of things that you need to do in the legacy world. So,
Right.
like, let's say, for example, that you create a DEX and you want to create a whitelisting policy for your DEX and say, I'm not going to say everybody can trade, but if persons in the United States, they have to meet a suitability guideline. Well, good luck writing all of that in an open, transparent smart contract language. It's really hard to do that because you then have to figure out, well, how do I keep all this personally identifiable information secure and store it on? And I'm going to have off-chain custody. And then at the end of the day, it just looks like a centralized application.
Right.
Well, if you have something like Midnight, what you can do is take that one compliance part, write a smart contract for that module, and maybe the core of the logic, the DEX part of it runs on Cardano, and both of these things basically work together. So now you talk about a multi-blockchain system
Yeah.
where one part does one thing, another part does another thing, and that's frankly where the entire DApp space has already gone. When you
Yeah.
think about it, people use Chainlink, people use Infura, people use multiple chains at the same time. And it's a service economy, and there's multiple resources for that service economy. The consumer pays one price up top, and then there's some mechanism that allows them to sort all of that out. And
Yeah.
what this does do is that means you don't overload the layer one of your system. The core of your system was trying to be everything to everybody. Instead, you now have competitive services that basically can provide that, and you have hooks to basically connect the system to a broader ecosystem. So it's architecturally speaking, we've already, as a IT people, they call it service-oriented architecture or microservices.
Right.
Been around for a long time, and the blockchain space hasn't quite gotten there because the way tokens work and the way blockchains work, they kind of incentivize people to build these giant monolithic, very fat protocols. And unfortunately, that doesn't work from both a cost perspective, an architecture perspective, and also from a service perspective, that you actually want to have high quality and high throughput and all these things. You need to load balance it in a different way. So that's kind of the most concise way I can describe it. And it's a complicated topic, and we've been kind of chipping away at it with videos and blog posts and these things and the
Right.
DevNet and showing people this and it'll take a little while for people to wrap their mind around it, I think.
Right. So two things that resonated there with me is to start with the latter point was I won't name the chain, but say blockchains that are very hardware heavy, and at some point only data centers can run those nodes. And so although we don't want to give up the capabilities that these blockchains have, but at the same time, we want to be able to run Cardano on a Raspberry Pi, right? So that, say, someone in sub-Saharan Africa or Southeast Asia that doesn't have the resources to have supercomputers to run their nodes still can participate in the governance of Cardano. And through the partner chain model, we can still accomplish everything else that these heavier monolithic chains have. So I think that brings us more inclusive globally to everybody. And then secondarily, the thing that resonates now, and being in the US myself, and very apropos with everything that's going on in government, Congress, legislation, potential KYC stuff, I'd imagine if in a hypothetical doomsday scenario, US SPOs had to KYC or somehow did their delegators, that KYC element could happen on midnight and not compromise that SPO that may have delegators elsewhere in the world potentially.
Yeah, it's hard to say where that's going to end up, but you have to be in a situation where the technology is enabling freedom and decentralization as opposed to picking winners and losers.
Right.
And if you look at our space, we have a laughable amount of decentralization. We know this because we're measuring it. If you take a look at the Edinburgh Decentralization Index as an example, it doesn't look very promising. And the big issue is the intermediates. So you'll have a DApp, and you'll be running some of that logic as a smart contract on blockchain, but then there's a lot of stuff you're not, and that's on a server that's
Right.
owned and controlled by a single person. Moxie Marlinspike wrote a wonderful blog post actually about how bad this is with Infura and OpenSea and these other providers. So if you really want to get decentralized infrastructure, the problem is that the centralized infrastructure is a very different thing from how a blockchain or a normal smart contract
Yeah.
system works. It has to compete with predictable pricing. It has to be able to have elasticity to it, so the resources scale on demand. It has to be able to provide a predictable product with, fitting into an SLA. And that's very different than a financial system, which only purpose is to ensure atomicity of a transaction.
Right.
Okay, that transaction settled. Great.
Got it.
You see, so when you start going into those different service models, you start talking about different notions of blockchain architecture, different notions of consensus, and they get too radically different from any one design trade-off that we can accommodate. And then it's not clear who's the winner in those, because in some cases, that's dependent upon the region and the application. For example, World Mobile, under the hood, you're talking about a telecommunications company. Okay. And then you're talking about a company that cannot be fully decentralized no matter how hard they try, because Spectrum is licensed. So at the end of the day, somebody has a state-sponsored monopoly, and they get a license agreement, and then they can sub-license it out and everything. But the ITU and the way licensing work, they don't let you fully decentralize that. That's by
Right.
law. They don't let you do that. And then you're talking about cell phones that want to be able to roam freely and connect on a drop of the hat and be able to share data. And that's a very different network model than what we expect with what an SPO would need or what a Cardano user would need. So what's going to happen in practice when you talk about a network of that nature is the smart contract layer, no matter what system they build that on, let's say Ethereum or Cardano or whatever, it's not going to fit all those use cases, and they're going to have to build all this off-chain infrastructure. Now, if you have a service layer, you can actually build a bespoke system just for that particular need.
Right.
You see,
Right.
and that's still roughly much more decentralized because it relies on the SPOs and other things to help bootstrap it and run it than it would be if it ran on a server. So they've become a lot more like a decentralized ISP, and they also can handle all this unique traffic that has nothing to do with the traffic of Cardano, and it doesn't drain the resources of Cardano. But
Right.
yet, World Mobile Token can stay as a Cardano native asset, and marketplaces can form for it there on the main chain. And that's kind of the interplay that you look for there. There's the service, the providing of the decentralized ISP, and there's kind of the financial side of it, the ownership, the trading,
Right.
this type of a thing, and separate those two. And if you do
Right.
it just the right way, it works really well.
And I think that's something that folks still need to, what's the word, really truly understand that the economic benefit, the economic activity that just being a Cardano native token does on chain is so beneficial to the parent chain, regardless of the service layer and the capacity and capabilities there. Which brings me to Eran. I wanted to ask a little bit if you could describe the dual token model and the interplay with the shielded and unshielded ledgers, and do both those ledgers reside on Midnight, or is the unshielded, for example, on Cardano and the shielded on Midnight, or are they both inhabiting Midnight's blockchain?
Sure. Let me make one more point to what you were commenting before, because I think you made a fantastic comment about kind of where the data lives and what's kind of the potential compliance exposure, as Charles was covering it. If we live in, if you see a Web 2 application that needs to collect, let's say, credit card information, they have to comply with PCI rules and other stuff, and that puts a huge burden on them. What usually you see them do is they call on another application like Stripe that would collect the PCI information and provide them only with a token back that they can later do for kind of follow-up transactions, charging or recurring, et cetera, et cetera. We're hoping to see a similar kind of a relationship between Cardano and Midnight, where exactly the example Charles was making, we could fulfill certain activities and provide a kind of a relationship back to the main chain.
Got it.
So let me kind of address your question about the dual token. I think when you look at chains in general that use a single token, you realize that there is a challenge with a single asset trying to service two separate kind of desires. You've got the people who want to use and operate the chain who would rather have the token or the price be as flat and as stable as possible.
Right.
You got people who are investing or gaining value from the appreciation of the token who'd like to see it kind of liquid and appreciate in value. And so you got two different audiences all fighting over the same asset with almost opposite agendas.
Right.
we wanted to kind of create a separation of those two, as well as address our challenge of providing a mechanism for the network to operate while shielding the metadata and not just the data, because there are some other data protection chains out there that only shield the data, and you can imagine that's not good enough for business purposes. So by actually having dual token, we get the best of both worlds, and we address both challenges, both the ability to shield the actual activity on chain, as well as have two tokens, each servicing a different purpose. One is the utility that acts more of a, if you will, like would have some sort of price stability, and another one that could provide the liquidity and security for the network and appreciation of value, and acts like a more, I'd say, the traditional tokens that you're familiar with. And we will
Right.
create an atomic swap on chain that allows you kind of the flow from the unshielded token to the shielded token. Now, let me address the other question because you asked a couple of questions all in one about the
Sorry.
shielded ledger and unshielded ledger.
Right.
In fact, our plan or what we built is that we have both a shielded ledger that kind of provides you with kind of the data protection, and there will be a second unshielded ledger on chain on midnight, because you've
Okay.
got use cases where you need both private data and public data. I'll give the example of, let's say, a voting application. You want to
Right.
have the votes be private, you want to have the list of candidates be public. If I were
Right.
to have the list of candidates off chain, because I don't have an unshielded ledger, I only have a shielded ledger on chain, I run the risk of that data set being manipulated while I'm doing kind of transactions on chain. So I want to have both the shielded data and the unshielded data both protected on the same chain. And now I have a selective disclosure of what do I want to put here versus there? How do I want to play between the kind of the two baskets? So I got
Right.
kind of the ability to do both.
Got it. Got it. That makes perfect sense. Um, I'm going to deviate a little bit because it brought up an excellent point, and I wanted to ask Charles, because especially with the video that you did yesterday and with everything Eran just mentioned, the concept of the supernode you brought up on the SPO side for Cardano. Although it's more a broader question for Partnerchains in its entirety, with all the other CSLs potentially down the line. How does the supernode concept work? Is it just one ledger, or is it sort of like a tree of different ledgers, and there's like a single point that branches out potentially?
Yeah. So what you have to have is the ability to containerize and modularize each of the infrastructures that you're running.
Right.
So it helps if your partner chains all follow a standardized framework. So Substrate has a lot of really good ideas on how to do that, and they've been able to demonstrate that at scale. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of moved in that direction. But even still, you need to have infrastructure where, when you're a stake pool operator, basically you just click the chains you want to support.
Right.
It downloads a container, and then you run a protocol, and that's that. So if you take a look at projects like Hyperledger Firefly, for example, they've really pioneered this idea of a supernode, and it's really cool architecture, and they built it for hosting. It was a commercial entity called Kaleido, and it runs Fabric, and it runs Ethereum through Besu, and it runs Think R3. Anyway, we'll get Cardano support for it. But that's really what you're looking for is this meta framework that you run. You've containerized all your stuff, and your consensus logic basically runs as a process. So there's kind of two threads that are happening at the same time on the partner chain framework side. So when you look at specifics, like Midnight is its own thing, so there's a team there, but then there's a dedicated team building the framework for partner chains, and the goal is to have that framework be open and available for anybody who wants to build a partner chain, so that hundreds of these chains can form.
Right.
That team is looking at how do we build much better staking experiences overall for SPOs to make this very easy and uniform for them to host these things, and just select which ones meet their values and their business. And then second, how do you do this in the lightest possible way?
Right.
So one of the goals is to explore this concept of log space consensus. So we wrote a paper called Log Space Mining a few years ago, which showed how to do mining as a light client
Right.
within the proof of work space. So you have the tip of the chain, you have the state of the existing system, a kind of a snapshot of the UTXO, and you're running and operating on that, but you don't have the full chain.
Right.
This is what we'd like to explore, kind of extending the concept of Mithril and putting that
Yeah.
into the staking process. Because if you can pull that off, that means as an SPO to support a partner chain, you don't have to download another full node, a full blockchain, but rather a much lighter footprint. And then you can manage dozens of these, potentially hundreds of these at the same time, in addition to the Cardano main chain. And there's not that big resource drag that exists there. So it's an ongoing thing. It's going to take a while to build all that tech out, but the good news is, this idea of super nodes is not new, and people are exploring them and doing really cool stuff with them. In fact, I'll even give your audience a link to the. I don't know if I can share a link with you guys, but I can share my screen. Can you see my screen? Let's see here. All right. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes. There we go.
All right. So Firefly right here is what I'm talking about. And let me show you the, so this is the repository for it. And let me go to the documentation. They have some really cool visuals here. But if you take a look at, let's see here, getting started. Let's see here, architecture. That's what we're looking for. So the node component architecture. So basically the core runs just so many amazing things, and it got this beautiful blockchain plugin kit, and everything kind of just plugs into it. So this allows you to plug in an identity stack and a blockchain stack, and you can put IPFS inside the system, and there's just dozens of really good ideas on how they've kind of put everything together for it. And it's a fairly mature project, and it's all with Go style microservices. So it's a very modern style architecture for it. And so what we're trying to do is kind of think in that direction of not only to solve the problem of how do you make supporting a partner chain lightweight, but then how do we upgrade the overall infrastructure that stake pool operators run so that they can start looking at maintaining a chain as a containerized service. They have a really nice powerful meta software that kind of sits on top, and they have everything there, their dashboards and their rich scripting capabilities, and then everything's a plugin, and it's very easy for them to add custom logic where and when that makes sense. So my hope is that the partner chain project can actually co-evolve that at the same time as the framework, and then it makes it very straightforward for people to do this. Because if we're successful, I think there's going to be dozens, if not hundreds, of partner chains on Cardano. So it makes it a lot more fun from a delegation perspective.
Yeah.
Because then when you're delegating to a pool, you'll actually not only see that they're supporting Cardano, but the list of all the partner chains they're supporting, because you get staking rewards from those partner chains as well.
And these businesses all can have a flavor, a philosophy, a mission, and an identity, right? And so I think communities arise from that. And just from a business standpoint, it makes being an SBO and the opportunities available from a revenue standpoint immense. So
No, you're absolutely right. Look, as an individual, if I want to get from point A to point B, I can, there's a plethora of vehicles and ways to get there, right? I could take a bus, I could take a car, I could take a truck, a plane, a train, etc., etc.
Yeah.
You use different kind of tools and different technologies as per the purpose that you're trying to achieve, right?
Yep.
The fact that two vehicles, one is a dune buggy, is probably not going to do very well on the road, and a sports car is not going to do very well on the dunes.
Right.
They're both cars, but you choose the right technology to the business problem you're trying to solve. We're not trying to be maximalist. This partner chain ecosystem and universe is really trying to be open, not lock people in, and get them to access the best thing that they need to solve their problem.
Absolutely. And you've designed it, the tokenomics, the transaction of fees, you've designed it in a way where it's mutually economically beneficial. There's reciprocity in all the relationships. So, there's incentive to collaborate as opposed to in the past that it's been the opposite. So
exactly. We want we recognize the contribution from the Cardano ecosystem and we pay back rewards for what they're doing the same way as you have in any other kind of tokenomics. We offer
Right.
some values, and if they like it and they want to use it, then great.
Yep. Yeah. It's like having a trade agreement, say, between Canada and the US, and the free flow of capital and the liquidity and talent, which is a different question later on. But I think, Fareed, you had a couple questions. So
Yeah, no, thank you. Really interesting conversation. I'm just learning and taking notes here for the recap towards the end. So let's maybe just kind of pivot back and focus a little bit more into midnight. I've got a couple of questions for Eran here. Hopefully, these are some that he can answer relatively quickly. But in a recent interview that you recently shot, you'd mentioned that Midnight did not have any dependencies or did not need Cardano. Now, I just want to clarify that here, for the community. It seems like, again, after watching Charles's latest video yesterday, is that there will be some sort of, at least at the early stage, a dependency between Cardano SPOs and Midnight, in the sense that they'll be providing security and then in return getting rewards in the form of some sort of token from the Midnight network. So do you mind maybe just kind of clarifying and just kind of demystifying what that early relationship is going to be like between Cardano and the Midnight network?
I think you described it perfectly well, in the sense of we will benefit from the Cardano security through the SPOs to drive our consensus and chain. But there could be a future where you don't necessarily get locked into just going through Cardano. Midnight is not necessarily built on Cardano technology. We had to build stuff kind of from the ground up. But definitely, I'd see in not necessarily just the near future, but maybe even a longer term, that there's a very tight relationship with the Cardano ecosystem, because it's very beneficial for both of us. And I hope that they'll see that it's beneficial for them. And this is a very much a reciprocal kind of relationship.
yeah.
And you have to understand also that when we talk a lot about migrations, we usually think, remember the old ERC20 converter days where we were like, hey, we're trying so hard to get these ERC20 tokens converted over to Cardano. And it turned out that that was a little harder than we thought. But it's not just about DApps migrating. We'd like entire chains to migrate and come over to Cardano. And so the concept of a partner chain gives you, with Minotaur, this concept of being able to connect your chain to multiple systems or become a layer one onto yourself. And so you're able to dynamically adjust that. And so if you have that freedom, then we can go and make the case to the chain links of the world or others, hey, why don't you guys come to us? Because you maximize your overall freedom as an ecosystem. You don't lose any of your connection and touch points to your other ecosystems. And there's a lot that we can offer. But the thing is that incumbent in that statement is that you can't just say, well, yes, they can leave Ethereum, but they can't leave Cardano. You see that then you're just no better than Polkadot or Cosmos, from that viewpoint. So you have to either believe in freedom or not believe in freedom, and it almost reminds me of the web standards days where people liked web standards a lot when it was in their benefit. And then when it would allow people to use their competitors' products, they're like, whoa, we don't know about that. That's why ActiveX existed on Internet Explorer, and they tried to kill CSS and all the standardization efforts of HTML. Well, similarly, Minotaur is all about basically giving the partner chains that freedom of the balance. And so that can be dynamically adjusted. And it's also a marketplace, because what if Cardano wants to fire the partner chain? So because these are marketplaces, and if the partner chain is not getting a lot of traffic or utility, or there's the Cardano ecosystem really doesn't like that partner chain for some reason, why does it make any sense for that partner chain to be indefinitely supported or force that upon the SPO? So it works kind of in both directions, is the Cardano network being a good trust anchor and a good ecosystem anchor for the partner chain, and is that service being consumed on a regular basis? So that's one direction. And then in the other side is that partner chain valuable to the Cardano ecosystem? You see, so both sides. Sorry, I've been sick this last 2 weeks. It's been very tough. But I hope that elucidates a little bit. I believe in freedom in marketplaces, and we try to maximize that every architectural pattern that we follow.
Yeah, you can't coerce a partnership. It has to be free will and voluntary. And I think when there is no, you know, golden handcuffs, you know, there is a more just human nature, feel less pressured into either leaving or staying. And it's like you said, what is the best decision for both sides? Kind of reminds me of like I'm in California, so like LA shipping port or Long Beach shipping port, where the ships come in, they dock, they berth, there's economic activity, they stay for X period of time. It could be a long time, it could be a short time. They may just stay there forever, who knows? But they come and go, but they're replaced by other ships constantly coming, constantly going, and there's constant. So the whole concept that I think people need to come to terms with is, to a point you made earlier, Charles, there's going to be hundreds potentially of these partner chains. There'll be hundreds of different partner chains bootstrapping at the beginning of that cycle, whilst others are moving through the process. And they, like a child growing up in a house, they start off as a child, they're completely dependent on the parent. Then they become a teenager, and you know, the analogy maybe then Minotaur is implemented on midnight, and there's some self-security, or they're secured by another chain. And then they become adults, and they may move out of the house, or they may move down into the basement, who knows? But and then more kids come along, and the same process replicates that way.
And also, you got to understand what Cardano has to sell. At the end of the day, our single biggest achievement, and one of the reasons why we're as an ecosystem worth $12 billion, is the power of our consensus protocol, Ouroboros, and the trust it's constructed, the density of stake pool operators we have, and the unblemished service record. Currently, that good is not exportable. And what Minotaur is doing is making that exportable now to the rest of the cryptocurrency ecosystem and saying, hey, this capability is for hire and for the income of the Cardano network as a whole, the ADA holders and the SPOs, because they built it. It's a great resource to export. So that's another beauty of the whole partner chain concept, is it gives us a way to actually sell a network resource that we currently can't sell. And frankly, no network can really sell very well.
That's incredible. So we are monetizing our greatest assets, and we're able to export it out and create economic value for Cardano. So I think that's kind of answers one of the questions I had later on. What is in it for Cardano from an economic standpoint? It is us able to trade and export our greatest asset, which is our security and our rock solid foundation and protocol. So that's fantastic. Fareed, you had another question, I believe.
Yeah. So to that end, it sounds like early on there will be some sort of dependency between Midnight and Cardano. And as Chris and Charles mentioned, as things mature, Minotaur comes along, there could be some sort of other network providing that backbone or that infrastructure for some of these services that come along. Now, to kind of demystify another question that I've seen kind of swirling around on Twitter, there's been the talk about the dual token model. And again, Charles did a really great job, I think, explaining that earlier, and Eran broke that down a little bit ago. Now, one token that we've heard of quite a bit has been the Dust token. So what I'm trying to understand is Dust going to be the token that lives or that is rewarded to the SPOs on the Cardano network as the Cardano native token, or is that going to reside on the Midnight network? And then I've got a quick follow-up after that.
Yeah. Dust is the fuel token, and it's shielded. But you know, what we're going to do with the tokenomics, guys, is when we're further down the pipe, have a whole series of blog posts and explainers, because this is not just a tokenomics model for Midnight. This is a recommended model for how to deploy a tokenomics of a partner chain in general. And so it's a little delicate, because there's a lot of touch points you have to think carefully about when you move from 1 to 2. And then also you have to figure out the right interplay of where they live. But ideally, one lives in Cardano, and the other one lives as a resource, and they follow different monetary policies. And there's a lot of modeling that's required. But right now, Dust is the shielded token. It lives as a resource on the side chain. But there's more to the story, and I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah. So if you come today to the DevNet, you can experience a shielded token with a shielded ledger and see how that works. And then we will, in the next kind of iteration, we will add the kind of expose the second token and the things that follow with the unshielded ledger and everything else. So we're kind of easing into the pool, if you will, of exposing people the functionality that we've built, and we're gradually kind of letting people see what we've done.
Yeah, thank you both for that quick and concise answer. I think, Eran, you just kind of touched on my follow-up, which was going to be, because we've only heard about one aspect, which is Dust, is there anything that you guys can share about the other token, which would be residing or which would be awarded to the security providers or SPOs in this instance?
It's wonderful. That's
The
the
best
next
token ever. It's huge. It's going to bring the whole space together.
Greatest
Wonderful.
token ever made.
Nice impersonation there, Charles. I think that's going to wrap up my three questions there when it comes to just understanding Midnight. Again, I want to thank you both here for your time. I'm going to turn the reins back over to Chris here to touch on some of the marketing questions that we've received and that we wanted to pose to the both of you.
Yeah. For the sake of brevity, we already really discussed really about the adoption and how it applies the increased adoption and the economic activity that's driven to Cardano by Midnight and other partner chains. So I'll move along to the second question, which is for Eran. What is the marketing strategy and approach to reach commercial companies and adoption for Midnight? So I did see there was a job posting for a head of strategic partnerships for Midnight. What is the strategy to go and engage with enterprise and get yourselves customers?
So I'd say it's a multifaceted strategy. First and foremost, we want to welcome and work with as many players as they are. I don't think that Midnight alone solves kind of the complete set of what a customer needs. If you think about it, the customer builds an application, they got a web service, or they got the actual heart of the application, they got the blockchain, they got some other compliance features, they got some other pieces. By having out of the box, Midnight already have relationship and partnership and integration with many of those other components. We are making it easier for customers kind of to complete the journey.
Right.
And so we're going to put some emphasis in the upcoming period to kind of create some of those relationships and build some of those integrations. Beyond that, we are looking to have some more, I'd say, traditional customers. I'm calling them traditional in the sense of they have not, I'd say, leaped so far into the Web3 world because of things like data protection not being kind of predominantly available on many chains, or the fact that they are looking to have some price stability so they can budget what they are looking to do. And have some of that audience suddenly discover Web3 and the potential of what blockchain and the distributed ledger can bring to their future kind of applications. So I'd say in the upcoming months, our main focus is really build more partnerships and expand the market from the ecosystems that we see today around Web3 to welcome other players into our market and see more kind of customers start looking into crossing the chasm into blockchain world.
Got it. Got it. Kind of a follow-on question then is much, using traditional kind of entities and the delegation and separation of tasks, roles, and responsibilities. Do you imagine for Midnight's blockchain at some point you have a commercial venture arm like Emergo, for example, and a foundation, or will everything live under the one roof of IO and your company specifically?
So I can't go into too much detail on this, but I will say that we believe in nurturing the market.
Mm.
And so what you see today with Cardano, for example, doing something with Project Catalyst, where they're incubating new kind of ideas into the market and kind of helping them birth and get momentum, is definitely something that we would like to see similarly happen for Midnight or people building on Midnight.
Much like a startup incubator and accelerator and all that good stuff.
Indeed.
Great.
Awesome. Interesting to hear the approach towards marketing moving forward. Let's now just kind of jump into the DevNet. The next question I have is going to be for Eran as well. So As it stands right now within Cardano and just the growing ecosystem, we've got things, for example, such as DEXs, launchpads, lending and borrowing. What types of applications can we see outside of the norm when it comes to Midnight and just what we can now do with ZK proofs and just all of this new technology, again, focusing on privacy?
Well, I think privacy, or I should say data protection, is just one dimension of Midnight. As I mentioned, we provide the ability to have a price predictability on the pricing of operating the chain, as well as doing some resource allocation, so you can kind of guarantee SLA. And these are kind of table stakes for people trying to build more of an kind of enterprise traditional application. We've had, I know at the conference I said we had over 1,000 teams apply for our DevNet. As of, I think yesterday, it's already eclipsed 1,500 teams. The inbound is faster than we can kind of catch up to it at this point, but we're doing our best to welcome as many of them as possible. And it has been just an enormous inflow of fascinating ideas. Anything from Charles yesterday touched on medical use cases where people are thinking about kind of holding data records and being able to discover drugs and treatments, to people talking about KYC, to people talking about ESG and carbon credits, to people talking about marketplace and creating some supply chain management, to WorldCoin and other telecom use cases, and so forth and so forth. We're going to start documenting or letting some of those players start kind of shining and getting their name in light to showcase what people are creating. It's just it's beyond what we expected. Really creative people.
That's nice to hear. I do have a quick follow-up, I guess, just for somebody trying to understand. Obviously, within Cardano, there's Haskell, Plutus in terms of development that's being used, and then there's TypeScript that's going to be used for Midnight. So, because again, there's going to be some sort of interconnectivity between both Midnight and Cardano, would there be some sort of way for somebody who's utilizing a Cardano wallet to be able to connect to applications utilizing Midnight and then therefore be able to transact with Midnight through the use of a Cardano-based wallet? Or is all of that going to be rebuilt directly on Midnight and they can only access it by using Midnight proprietary software?
No. There'll be bridges. It's just extensions to things like SIP30 and this stuff. And you don't want the user or the wallet developer to have to worry too much and say, "Oh God, how do I connect to Midnight?" or these types of things. And that's why you want a standardized framework, because when you have that, then once you've built that bridging mechanism and that calling mechanism, it's ubiquitous for all partner chains, because there's going to be dozens of services that exist, and you want a uniform way for those things to be accessed.
Awesome to hear. My last question here before I turn it back over to Chris to talk about the Dust airdrop and potential tokenomics there. Um, in the past couple of months, if not years, we've been taught within crypto that bridges are just inherently risky. And so, because there will be some sort of bridging connection between the Cardano asset settlement layer and some of these services that are built, what are you guys doing in terms of making sure that the bridge is secure, but then also kind of changing that narrative that we've all come to know about bridges themselves being somewhat of a risk more than a benefit?
Charles, you want to? I can answer. You want me to talk about this?
Yeah. So there's a lot of cool things you can do in the zero knowledge world that basically remove the trust factor. So if you put recursion in and both sides support it, the partner chain framework and the other side, you kind of don't have a trust notion. So there's some halfway house solutions you also put in involving trusted hardware. And the challenge is that it's not good enough just to have all these great capabilities on Midnight. We also have to upgrade Cardano at the same time. So there's a great upgrade that's coming through with Plutus V3, which adds BLS support, and this could be enough to get a really good first generation bridging technology. And it's not just, by the way, asset movement. You also need state movement as well. So what's going to happen when you have a DApp is it's going to have state that exists in many places, off chain, in a Hydra channel, on chain, in a partner chain, and you need to keep that all synced. And part is having the service be able to do that, but then part is making sure that you have proofs on the wire. One of the reasons why bridges get hacked is that you'll have a really secure side, and then you'll have another side that relies on a higher than you'd expect notion of trust, and there's usually a vulnerability in the software that breaks that. A great example is the only time I've ever lost money in the entire history of crypto in a hack, because I stayed away from Ethereum, was that it was the Nomad hack,
Yeah.
because we had stuff with Milkamana and what was it, Wing Riders, and that those tokens got taken, and it wasn't on the Cardano side, it was on the Ethereum side, right?
Yeah.
And it got hit. So it's like it's like Godfather, they keep dragging you back no matter what you do. So some layering combination of proof on the wire and then belt and suspenders, usually if you have to, for things that are lower trust, for example, Bitcoin trusted execution environments, those two generally work pretty well. Like a big part of our strategy is we'd like to bridge to Bitcoin. I can't do anything with Bitcoin because it's not programmable. So you have to accept those limitations of the system. You have to accept that there are higher than normal risks that are associated with touching that ecosystem. But if it's partner chain to main chain and back, over a period of time, I think cryptography has mostly resolved all the trust issues that are using recursion.
Kind of as a follow-on question for Midnight, because it's built on ZK proof technology, that both ends of the bridge are secure. Potentially other partner chains with different capabilities, different consensus, designed for something completely different that does not incorporate ZK proofs, for example, because there's no need. Is there a vulnerability there, or is it much like what you said with Cardano? They just have to implement the BLS support on that end as well to kind of keep that
It's
secure?
one of those things we have to put at the framework level for the partner chain, so that becomes free stuff that everybody gets. There are certain things I don't really feel comfortable people rolling their own, and crypto is one thing. I think the people who are really good at that should do it and let other people worry about their particular logic. So if the framework itself has that becomes a big competitive differentiator for all partner chains.
Great, perfect. So, so it's part of the spec requirements to be a partner chain in Cardano. This is part of that. So perfect. I think that rolls us into the Dusk airdrop question that we had. So it was enlightening, the conversation we had earlier on, that Dust is the fuel on Midnight. And so I would imagine that, in past interviews that you've done, and so has Eran, about the airdrop to ADA holders, that would be not Dust, but the governance / Cardano native asset.
Unshielded token, yeah.
The Unshielded that's airdropped. And to your point, you already mentioned that it's cooking, so not too much can be shared. But just for clarity, it is the Unshielded token that would be airdropped.
I'll make the only caveat that if you only provide the unshielded token, and the only way to convert from the unshielded token to the shielded token is through an atomic swap on Midnight, then you need a tiny bit of Dust in order to get that kind of going. But we will kind of work out all those details in order to make sure that people, I mean, if you step back and you ask yourself, why are we even giving tokens? Well, what's the purpose of this? Oh, well, it's to kind of kickstart kind of the process, right? And enable people to come and utilize the network. So we are working towards that business kind of objective.
Right. Absolutely. So it is, you're charging the battery so the car can go.
Pretty much.
Don't worry, guys. Everybody's going to be happy.
Yes. That's
go ahead.
Farid.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's really been the highlight in the past couple of weeks. There's been so many questions around the airdrop, and to get a little bit of clarity surrounding that, I think is always helpful. So looks like we have to stay tuned, and they'll be dropping more details here as those become available. Chris, did you have any other questions surrounding the Dust airdrop and the tokenomics, given what Charles and Eran have already said?
Well, I was going to ask if it was going to be just a flat amount across the board, regardless of a stake amount, or if it was 1 ADA equals 1 X token or whatnot.
Not going to get into it.
Got it. No worries.
It's worth a shot. It's worth a shot. Okay,
Yeah.
so I think we've run through the majority of our questions here surrounding Midnight and the Cardano service approach moving forward. I do want to just quickly pivot as we get ready to close things down. Again, thank you both for your time. This one I think is going to be maybe geared more towards Charles, but maybe Aaron can also jump in here. But we recently saw an announcement that Sean Ford was appointed as the CEO and David Markley as the COO of a brand new stablecoin venture spun up by IOG. Charles, do you mind touching on, why you think this is a need and what kind of commodities or currencies that we could be seeing used as pegs for some of these stable coins coming out of this venture?
Well, I mean, you got JED, you have the Wyoming stablecoin project, and that's just the tip of the spear. And the reality is, you have to, if you're serious about DeFi and crypto, have some ability to achieve value stability. And if you don't, well, then you can't do DeFi. You can't have a financial system. Like, how do you do lending if the asset goes up and down 30% per day? So Sean is one of the best guys in the world at this. He did the Bank of South Africa, the Bank of Italy, the Marshall Islands deal. After we passed on El Salvador, he took over the deals for El Salvador and kind of got it over the finish line. And that was fun for the Algorand people. So I've known him for years, and he lives in Wyoming now, over in Sheridan. And I called him up and I said, "Well, what are you doing out there? Come on now, let's go posse up and get some stuff done." But I tell you what, I go into detail now, or what I could do is bring him back, and we could do an interview with you guys and Sean, and we
Yeah,
can kind of talk around the whole strategy if you give us a month or two to let the waters settle.
that
Yeah,
would be
that sounds.
wonderful.
Yep, I agree. I guess to that end, maybe we just get some closing thoughts from yourself, Charles, and Aaron, and then we'll go ahead and close this out. I do want to just maybe just quickly ask though, Charles, you had recently kind of alluded to a potential collaboration with Kraken. Could we potentially see Kraken becoming a partner chain in the near
Well,
future?
that's why we built the partner chain framework, was exactly for these types of use cases. And I would really hope that Jesse sees the wisdom in that. And I've been trying to reach him. I PM'd him over Twitter, and sent through other channels, and we're just trying to get a sense. They're a Wyoming-based Speedy Bank, and we're kind of neighbors, and so I'd love to work with him. He's a great guy, and I've known him for basically a decade now. He's one of the oldest people in the space that I know, along with Roger Ver and the other people. And Kraken has a lot of integrity. They're really good people, and I hope we can make the case that Cardano is a good home for what they want to do.
Yeah, after hearing the chat yesterday and just seeing all the opportunities that could be presented with this brand new service layer, I think it makes Cardano look that much more attractive. So, again, I want to turn it over to Aaron and Charles for any closing thoughts or comments surrounding Midnight and anything that you guys want to share with the community.
I'll just say that I'm very thankful for everybody that has been supporting us. It's just been an overwhelming positive, and we're really excited. We're onboarding more and more people every day. I apologize again to all those people who couldn't get through the door on day one. We're getting to you. We're trying to run as fast as we can, and I hope that what we've built could not only just enrich your experience and your ability to create applications that really solve real world problems and would enable kind of the web 2 community or the traditional markets for first time, or to suddenly see the value in blockchain and what they can do with this technology. So we're really hoping we're helping you cross the chasm and create a new game in the market. So it's just been fantastic, and let's partner together and work it out.
It's the innovation guys. We're here, and we got to build as an ecosystem. We took the time to do everything the right way, and now that we've done it the right way, we're standing on some amazing foundations. But a foundation doesn't make a home; it just ensures that the home that you build lasts a long time. So now we got to build a beautiful home, and that's what we're doing. And the whole point of the service layer is to make that home a great place to live and have a lot of things that you can do. So Midnight is the tip of the spear, but by no means is it the only one that's coming. And I want to see Cardano be the largest financial ecosystem in the world. I want to see the Cardano blockchain succeed. I think we have the right values, community, and principles, and frankly, the best governance with SIP 1694. And people are working real hard right now. And what you're seeing is these amazing companies, whether the ones led by Sean or Eran, who have these incredible ideas that are really pushing the space to the next level. And this is what's going to create the mass adoption to bring all of the legacy stuff into the cryptocurrency industry and have them see what makes us special for the first time ever. So we're in the right place in the right time. And I'm really glad that you guys had us on. And unfortunately, I do have to get going. But I just want to say to the community, thanks for all the love and faith and support. And we can't wait to work with you. I think over 1,500 people on the DevNet already, and it's growing by leaps and bounds. It's pretty crazy.
Thank you, Charles. It was an honor, and thank you, Eran, for spending some time with us.
Yeah. Thank you
Cheers,
both.
everyone.
Take care.
You guys.